But anyways, real excited for the college football season. I think the most important question for a guy named Kyle Hunter is which teams in college football is going to have a change of pace this year. And this is where your bread is buttered, because lots of books don't even adjust properly with new coaches, new offensive coordinators. So there's teams out there that you always research when this happens. Sometimes we can get on a line early, and then you'll see that line starts moving when other people start catching on. Now's the time to look at these, Kyle. Which teams are the ones that's going to change?
It's absolutely the time to look at these, and you'll notice the marketplace kind of catching on little by little. So early in the season, if you have an edge on something like this, you're going to want to play it early in the week. Obviously, it doesn't, these lines have been up for a long time for the week 0 and week 1 games. But as we go forward, if we see them playing that faster pace or slower pace that we expect, people will catch on here fairly quickly. So you're going to want to bet these earlier rather than later. Auburn's the first team I wanted to talk about here. We'll start with a big name team. Brian Harson is a big change from Gus Malzahn. Really think there's going to be a lot slower tempo and a lot more running of the football. Look, we've figured out that Bo Nix is not really that good at this point, right? He was hyped quite a bit. I don't think he's terrible, but he's certainly not the great prospect that a lot of people thought he was going to be. So Auburn has a really good running back in Bigsby. I think Brian Harson is going to run the football a lot and try to use the clock here this year. So I think Auburn's tempo will be much slower, and we'll see a lot of running from them.
Yeah, no disagreement from me here. And obviously, that change might even happen a little bit towards the UCF side, right? Because I wrote down that UCF under Josh Hypel and even Scott Frost before that was the fastest team last year as far as just number of plays per game. I know North Texas is flirting with them and everything, but Gus Malzahn, even though he was a little faster, he ain't going to be that fast. And he actually only ranked in 83 in plays per game, part of the reason why he was getting beat. But I think UCF slows down.
I do too. So there's a bonus one for sure. I think that one relates to this. UCF was so fast last year that I think they'll still be relatively fast, but definitely slower than last year. We'll see what the totals market does to adjust to that one. Utah State's another one I wanted to bring up. Blake Anderson from Arkansas State. First season upgrade as a coach, certainly faster tempo than what they had here in the past. Utah State was 65th in tempo last year. Arkansas State has been top 10 or 15 every year under Blake Anderson. So Utah State will be playing much faster this year. They bring over the Arkansas State quarterback, Logan Bonner. I think Utah State will play much faster. I will look to see some overs, some very high scoring games there from Utah State, at least compared to what they had last year.
Great minds, Kyle. I had them written down as well. Blake Anderson to Utah State, ranked top 10 in pace last year and top 22 over the last 3 years in Arkansas State. He was even a little faster than that because Arkansas State wasn't the greatest team the past few years. I think it was maybe 5-6 years ago when they were kind of tops in their Sun Belt there. But this should go way up from Gary Anderson's game. And this is more under the radar, being that it's a group of 5 conference in the Mountain West. So you're going to be able to pick them off. And even if they're not scoring a lot, they're going to give up a lot. The quick teams lose fast. So if you find out after the first week or so that they're not a good team, the other team's going to get a larger margin on the point spread. So they might be play on teams fading Utah State if they don't live up to what they should be. Anything else, Kyle?
Yeah, Western Kentucky is one I wanted to point out. Tyson Hilton brought in Bailey Zappi at quarterback, brought over the offensive coordinator as well, and also their top 2 wide receivers. So basically Houston Baptist's air raid offense turns into Western Kentucky's air raid offense. I think they'll be much improved offensively. Western Kentucky is a team that I like quite a bit. I like the season win total over for Western Kentucky. So there's a bonus there that I like, over 5.5 on Western Kentucky for this season. And I think that this team's going to have some really high scoring games. They lost a lot of defense from last year, defense that was pretty decent. Last year's offense was very weak, inefficient. I think we see some high scoring games from Western Kentucky.
Yeah, that's one that I didn't have written down, but I thought about it a couple of weeks ago. Great call. And they also took a lot of players from Houston Baptist. They're great last year, and he brought him some players with him. I don't even think there was a year rule when it comes to an FCS, to an FBS either. So that was fantastic for them. Really, really under the radar Conference USA team, Western Kentucky will be this year. It could surprise some people, I think. Any other ones?
So yeah, one more. And you mentioned him in passing there a little bit earlier. And so we've talked around UCF and Auburn here quite a bit, but Tennessee, we've got Josh Hypel at Tennessee now. Their team was ranked first in the country in tempo last year. They were extremely fast. Tennessee has been nothing like that lately. I do think it might take a little bit for them to be the first fastest team in the country, because I don't think Tennessee exactly has the playmakers on offense and the type of team to be able to go first right away. And if they do, I don't know that they'll work too well. So Tennessee is a team that I'd probably rather fade than bet on here this year. But I do think Tennessee games could be good overplays, because I think this defense is going to struggle as they play faster. And I think their offense will play so quickly that even if they're not that efficient, they can have some pretty high scoring games.
I had them, of course, too. And we discussed before the podcast that we're going to line up on a few of these. Definitely Josh Hypel coming up to Tennessee, coming from UCF, is that other effect here. They're going to go up in pace for sure. But I also agree that it's not going to be right away, because if you don't have the players to do it, you don't want to give up those points. And Josh Hypel knows that. Now, you saw the same thing a little bit with Mississippi State and Mike Leach last year. He didn't play that offense wasn't as fast as it was at Washington State last year. And I think it will gel to more speed, but it's the same type of experience coming in. One thing about Josh Hypel, I have a little season win total on that later to discuss. I also have one more though, Kyle. Jed Fish to Arizona, I think, is going to slow it down a little bit. You saw what happened when they got dominated by Arizona State, and part of the reason it was so embarrassing, 77-3, was because Arizona State we went 3 and out quick because they were passing the ball and the clock wasn't moving. So with someone there, they did play a little bit faster. And Jed Fish, coming from the Patriots, they're not exactly a fast-paced offense under Belichick, and he's done some college stints as well. So I didn't know if you looked at that one.
Yeah, I think that it's likely that they will play slower, also partially because they're such a bad team. They realize that the only way that they can try to stay in some of these games is control the ball, run the football as much as they can, play keep away. So my guess is they're going to be having such a weak season. At least first half unders would be good bets, because in the second half, you could argue they might have to speed up because they're going to be getting their butt kicked. So I think that that's definitely a good one to look at. That's a team that I don't want to bet on. Like, it'd be really hard to make a number that I would want to bet on that team, because I just don't think there's much talent there at all.
Oh, great stuff. All right. I don't either. And so we'll look towards the first half. Derivative markets are going to play a big part in these games. And I have a derivative play for premiums coming up as soon as they are released, coming up this weekend for Saturday's big games. But do have a question. How big will COVID play a role in college football this year?
Like I said earlier, I feel like we kind of got robbed a little bit from a real season last year. I'm certainly glad we got something, but it was nothing like a real season. I think this year will be somewhat better. Think there will still be issues, and it's going to be interesting to see which conferences are more of an issue. I think we'll see early on, right? Because some of these conferences are going to have different rules from one to another, more testing happening, things like that. Certainly don't want to make this a political thing at all, but, just the question of which conference is going to do things which way, handicapping wise, we'll figure it out early on when we start seeing cancellations from the same conference. So one thing I will say is that it's going to be important to follow the beat writers, check the depth charts again. I think that, for me, this was a little frustrating last year. I like looking at numbers. I like looking at, projections of how the game might go. I don't love looking at, following beat writers to see, who's sitting out because of quarantine and stuff like that. Certainly nobody likes that all this is going on, but I think it will still be happening some, but I do think that it will go better than last year. What about you?
I think so too. And yes, leaving politics completely out of it, they're going to realize that, hey, we have a fan base. We have people that are expecting. They already sold season tickets. they're going to want to do some stuff, but I think it's going to get toned down myself, and I think you're going to see less of it. I mean, if it was up to me, I mean, if you're sick, you don't play at all. Like, don't play through the flu as some kids used to do. I think that those days are gone. If you're sick, don't play. That's the way I think they need to go. Just to is any symptoms of colds or anything, you just sit out and stay away from people, family. Just stay in your dorm or apartment or whatever you're living at, and just live life like that. But from the flip side, I don't expect it big, and I really hope I don't. Now it looks like we're going to have a full season, and there will be a few games that will get screwed up, in my opinion. But we'll see how bad it is. Nothing that we can control, of course. Real quick on the totals last year, and obviously a lot of these games didn't have fans. What was the totals, stats, over-unders from a closing line perspective?
Yeah, this was 268, 265, and 9 to the overs. So just barely more overs. 50.3% of the games went over the total. I will note, Kiev, when I was looking through this, the over was doing amazing earlier in the season last year. And you can kind of chart it out to see that the over was looking great. And then you get to the end of the season, you have some more important games, right? You also have some games that were bad weather at the end of last season. So the under came back and made it really close, but the over was sitting, 53% there for a good while. So I think that's important to point out too. We always talk about how weather is really important in college football. Beginning of the season, less likely to have the cold and the wind and stuff like that. Later in the season, we see that more. I will say 2 years ago, the under went 425 and 405. And overall, over the last 10 or 15 years, the under has cashed in more often than the over. So, I think it's interesting that we saw even just barely more overs than we did unders last year. I think that does say something to the fact that, we had quiet stadiums and it was easier to go fast, I'd say. I even was talking to you through emails there that it seemed like, the tempo had changed a bit last year. When I was looking at the average pace of play, teams had sped up a bit. And it really makes sense if you think about it, because it's a lot easier to play fast when there's no noise. So I think we'll see that come back a little bit to normal this year. We'll see if the totals are adjusted, right? Because I'm not sure that the odds makers would be thinking too much about something like that. Obviously, if there's a big change to lower scoring games or slower pace games, there will be a big adjustment here pretty soon. But I think it wasn't anything drastic last year. But like I said, the over was cashing in pretty good, and then the under did well there late in the season. Again, I would think the under might be the better play here this season. But again, it's going to be matchup specific, certainly.
I'm already starting to see some inflation in the total lines, and I think it will. And it leads to my next question, because I was going to ask, how is that change with fans now coming back going to affect how the lines are going to be early? And I guess the answer is that they might be a little bit inflated from last year. Red zone efficiency changes a lot when there's fans at the home team, especially. It's like the other team doesn't score as well when it's that loud. They're screaming when they're within the 20. It's different. And you're right. They can't play fast when they're kind of looking around, not sure what to do. They take longer to take their plays. Great stuff there. So I personally think I'm going to look more from the under perspective. There's going to be certain situations where I take an over, but I'm hoping to play a lot more unders. And I think if you wait on the market to take it up, because this would be very public for them to do, is to drive those totals up based on last year's numbers. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. Going into, first, you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think that non-conference games have probably been better to the over in the long run than conference games. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I know it's the case in college basketball. I believe that's the case in college football as well. So when you get teams that play somebody that they're more familiar with, the games are usually a little bit more low scoring. But we know some of these conferences are starting with conference games, right? And we'll talk about one of them here pretty soon. But I think that the under would be the way that I would lean toward trying to play more of these totals. But that's not to say that I won't play any overs early on either. So, I don't think that either one of us are trying to say that there's just going to be, 60 some percent unders right off the bat. But, if you have an edge to one side or the other, I would lean toward the under here early on.
Totally. 100%. No disagreement between us on that one. Let's look at the season win totals, Kyle. You said you had a couple that you wanted to throw out there. Generous of you. for putting that on the odds breakers.
Yeah, I wanted to give out Old Dominion under 4 on the season win total here. I have to say that it's shocking to me that people just think Old Dominion would win several more games all at once after they didn't play last season. This team was awful 2 years ago. What makes us think that them sitting out last year all at once, this team's going to start winning a lot of games? Certainly they do play in a weak conference, and I think that would go to say that maybe they can pick up 2 or 3 wins, but I feel like 4 is basically the top here. So you can get under 4, quite a few spots, under 3.5 at a big plus money price. Several places. I don't hate that either. So I think Old Dominion could be one of those, 2-win teams or possibly 3-win teams this year where the under is a good look here because, like I said, I'm one of those guys that I don't think that sitting out and, you miss a season is going to help you in any way because, you didn't get to develop. It's harder to get better just through practice. You need some game action. So I think Old Dominion is in for another long season this year.
Yeah, I don't even know why I didn't take that yet. I have them about 2.5 wins. I see a win versus Hampton, a half win at UTEP. I don't even think they're going to beat UTEP. And maybe at FIU, but they should lose at home to Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech. They should lose at Middle Tennessee. Charlotte's another half win possibility. So, yeah, I mean, they're not beating Liberty. They're not beating Wake Forest, not beating Buffalo. Yeah, at Marshall, forget it. That should be a lock. I mean, closest thing to a lock. There are no locks in this business, but you know what I mean. Great play is what I'm trying to say. I'm going to give out one real quick. Just going back to what I was saying about Josh Hypel, I think that Tennessee goes under 6. They only rank 117th in returning production. From Bill Conley's old article, now that's a little bit expired. Some things changed, but still, they lost a ton. They have a new coach, Josh, obviously, and they have a new quarterback. I didn't love Hypel when he was offensive coordinator at Missouri a couple years ago. And I know they scored some points, and that was the reason he got the UCF job. But I'm just not buying him the first year with this messed up program. They have a new athletic director. They're starting completely fresh again. I mean, they just did this with Butch Davis. It's just, it feels like 2 or 3 years ago. They even give their last coach a chance, really, in my opinion. But just too much change to get to a bowl game. 6 is your bowl game. I see 5 wins most likely, but it's going to be hard to get to 6 when Alabama and Ole Miss are your at-large teams from the West that you have to play. Those are 2 of the top 3, 4, probably top 4 or 5 teams for sure if you're throwing LSU in there from the West. You're not beating them. And if you push at 6 somehow, I just can't see you busting your ticket at 7. So that's my thoughts, Kyle.
I like this one as well. And you meant Butch Jones, certainly there at Tennessee.
Butch Jones, yeah. Butch Jones, yeah.
Butch Davis, another Butch, obviously. But you got, Butch Jones to Josh Hypel. Do we think that this is a big coaching upgrade? I don't even know if it's a coaching upgrade at all. I don't think Hypel has done very well, even where he was at UCF. To me, I'm surprised he got this job. I don't think this was that great of a hire. So I like this one. I think this is a play that I have strongly considered betting myself. I'm going to be looking around a little bit for some more of these season win totals here the rest of this week. And this is very high on my list of possible plays. So total agreement from me on Tennessee. It's hard to see them getting to 7. It feels like 6 is the max here. So, I never hate a play when you sit there and you say, this looks like the absolute ceiling, and you've got the under right on that number. So I do like Tennessee under.
All right, good stuff. Well, do you have another one for us?
Yeah, one more I want to say here. Kent State over the total here. I like Kent State. I got 5.5 at plus money is available here. I like Kent State. Dustin Crum is a machine. He's a tremendous quarterback in this Lewis offense. This is a really well-coached team. The MAC is not a good conference. The MAC East is far more wide open than it's been in the past with Leipold and Frank Solich being gone. I think Kent State has a lot of upside this year. Dustin Crum is the best player in the MAC, the best quarterback by a large margin. As long as he stays healthy, I think Kent can really make some noise. Now, they have a tough non-conference schedule, very tough. But I think Kent State will do well once they get in the MAC. And maybe those tough games early on will help them to be a good moneymaker in the MAC. I think Kent gets to at least 6 wins this year.
Yeah, I have them as a potential future bet too. I think I made a small future bet on them winning the MAC. I like how they get Buffalo at home and there's no Ball State. So at least they're awarded that from that side of it, right? Yeah, I mean, at Maryland, at Iowa, and what was their other one? At Texas A&M. Yeah, those are losses for sure. But I think Maryland, you probably bet the over unless it's 120. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could argue that they have at least a chance against Maryland, I think, because I do think they'll score a lot of points in that game. The question is if they can get any stops, and they probably can't. But yeah, I was going to say, and I'm glad you said it that way, it's going to be really hard to keep me off the over in that game. It's going to have to be a really, really high total for me to not bet that over.
100%. And I love Sean Lewis. He was a Badger. He played quarterback and tight end in the early 2000s for Wisconsin. So he's got that program going, kind of like in a Paul Chryst type direction. So I'm really liking what they're doing there. Real quick, since you picked on somebody, Kyle, little stepchild of the poor, we're going to do the same with Northern Illinois. It took me a little while to get to it, but you know what? I eventually realized I have to take this under. I actually like their conference total under at 2 as well. So if you can find that, but I took under 3.5. And I think that they only have 2 for sure wins, and that's Maine and Bowling Green at home. I don't think they're going to beat Eastern Michigan at home. And Wyoming's a better team this year, and that's their only other shot. But, at Georgia Tech, at Michigan is their other non-conference games. And then at Penn State, they got Ball State at home, which is a mess. Western Michigan at home, which is a better team. At Central Michigan, which could have been a chance. At Toledo, it's real tough. I don't like their coach, Thomas Hammock, at all. There's a reason this team lost 5 games last year. Only one was close, really, at Western Michigan. Ball State was somewhat close. It was a weird spot for them, I guess. But Northern Illinois seems to get worse down in my charts.
Yeah, it's hard for me to take these low unders like this, but I can't disagree with this one because you look down the schedule for Northern Illinois and you're trying to find that third win. I can't find a third win either. Maybe they get to 3 by pulling an upset somewhere, but 4, that looks undoable in this spot. And I agree with what you said. Their coaching staff does not impress me at all. They were supposed to be good coaching staff defensively. Their defensive numbers last year were atrocious, more than 6 yards per carry. This Northern Illinois team has been so weak, and I don't like the direction they're heading in. I don't see any reason for us to assume that they're just going to turn it around. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is where Rocky Lombardi transferred from Michigan State to here. And I know some people have been saying, well, Rocky Lombardi, you get a transfer in a Big Ten quarterback. Lombardi was terrible at Michigan State. He was the backup who, when he came in the game, it just things were really ugly. I've made the joke that, when I had unders and Lombardi was playing, I was worried that I was going to lose because he was going to turn it over on a pick 6. I wasn't worried about his team scoring. I was worried about the other team scoring. And,
right.
Maybe obviously he has some more success in the MAC than what he did there, but I don't think the Lombardi is the answer here. And I agree with you. The coaching staff, I'm really low on.
No, absolutely. Rocky Lombardi, he showed one flash, and I can't remember what game it was. He looked good once, and then the rest of it was just absolutely terrible. So agree with you there, man. Let's get into some college football then, my man. Week 1A. A lot of people call it week 0, but I always say it's impossible to have a 0. It has to be week 1A for me. I'll argue to death with anyone about that. But getting to a Big Ten showdown already. We have Nebraska versus Illinois. Illinois is +7, seen some +6.5. The total is at about 55. I'll start this one. I'm just going to say Nebraska. They have not yet really shown anything for their fans with that big Scott Frost hire. This is his 4th year now, and you can say what you want, COVID and all that, but he's been pissing off some people over there. If you follow the beat writers in Nebraska, there's some weird stuff going on with him and his family, the way he's treating his players, just some strange stuff coming out of there. And a couple of their key guys did transfer out. But what I will say is they do always have a tough schedule. They're always playing Ohio State. Of course, they always have Iowa and Wisconsin. And, of course, they get Penn State a couple times recently. At least they're 0.1 net yards per play positive last year. As bad as they looked, They ranked 20th in their last 3 recruiting classes. And I look at 2018, 2019, 2020. I average those together, and then they rank 20. I like averaging those because 2021 is an outlier. They barely play. And 2017, they're usually gone. So I look at those 3 years. But I like the consistency with the coach, at least and Adrian Martinez. Now, Illinois doesn't recruit like the typical Big Ten schools. They only rank 60th in recruiting over the 3 years. Brett Bielema, I don't care if you call me a Badger fan and a spiteful one, he's fraudulent as a head coach, in my opinion. He lucked out. Barry Alvarez set him up well when he retired. He had Paul Christ as an offensive coordinator, and then he had Matt Canada after that for an offensive coordinator, not to mention good old Russell Wilson transferring in and becoming a star in the NFL. And he was fantastic at that Rose Bowl against Oregon. I was at that Rose Bowl. But in my opinion, Bielema was just there, and it showed who he really was at Arkansas. Now, Illinois, minus 1.12 yards per play last year. My power number, though, minus 7.25. So, I mean, this is so close to my spread. If you give Illinois just 3 for home field, it's 7.25. I don't think you can give Illinois more than 3 for home field ever. So I didn't play it. Any thoughts?
Yeah, this one opened 10 and even north of 10 some places. And I will say if it was 10, I would be saying I'll take Illinois here in this one. But 7 is a fair number. I have 6.5 on this one when I looked at my numbers here more closely last night. To me, these are 2 teams that we don't know exactly who they're going to be yet, and I'd rather sit this one out. I will say Adrian Martinez, do we know what he is? I mean, he's a turnover machine. 15 lost fumbles in the last 3 years. That's a major problem to me. You can't lose that many fumbles. He has a high completion percentage, but he doesn't throw the ball very far at all. So, average depth of target is really low for him. So that makes a difference. Obviously, if you throw in a bunch of screen passes, you can have that really high percentage. Wan'Dale Robinson transferred, his top receiver from last year. To me, Nebraska's defense was actually pretty good last year. They were 44th in yards per play allowed. Their games were 7-1 to the under last year. In 35 red zone trips for the Nebraska offense last year, they had just 18 touchdowns, which is terrible. Illinois in the red zone, 12 touchdowns and 26 red zone trips, which is even worse. So 8 turnovers in the red zone for Illinois last year. These are 2 teams that found their way to the red zone and then found a way to not score last year, and at least not to get touchdowns. Can these offenses improve in the red zone? I think Illinois should be better under Bielema. I'm not a big fan of Brett Bielema, the person. I do think he'll do a decent job with Illinois, especially because they have good running backs and a pretty good offensive line. That's their one strength at this point, is that Illinois can run the football. That's what he wants to do. I think Illinois will run and have some success running here in this game and in this season. The total is an interesting one because this is one that I put a question mark by right away as far as the total. I don't really know what to think of this because I think Illinois will play very slowly under Bielema, run the football a lot. We're not going to see up-tempo action. Nebraska likes to play fast some, but they're not efficient. 55 is a pretty high total. I lean to the under in this one. My number is a couple points lower than this, but I don't feel strongly enough to have this be, a big play or anything. So my strongest lean in this game is under. There was higher numbers than this available, and we'll see if maybe the public bets the over as we get closer to this game. 55 is where it's at right now. 56 is another key number. So if it gets up to that, I might put some small money on the under.
Yeah, and that's what kept me off the over is what you said, red zone efficiency and their obviously the returning production on defense. Both of these are top 20 returning production on defense, so their offenses aren't really gelling a ton, minus Adrian Martinez maybe. So my only lean is Nebraska just because I'm that low in Illinois, but not a play right now. So good stuff, Kyle. Way to break that down. Very, very good using the advanced metrics on that. Let's move into week 1B then. And this should be one that's fun for you. Army versus Georgia State. And I picked this because it's under the radar and Kyle is under the radar. So I'm going to let you go first here. I have -3 and my total disappeared. Do you have the total handy? Was it like 40.
Yeah, 51.5, 52 a couple places, mostly 51.5 the total for this one. And I'm kind of regretting. I didn't even think about it, Kiev. I'm wishing I wore my Army hat for this one. That would have been a good opportunity, right? But missed chance anyways. But I like that you brought up this game. You knew I would like this one when you sent it over. This was the one I'm like, yes, I like talking about a game like this because most people won't talk about it, right? There's going to be a lot of people talking about several of these other games. Army, Georgia State's not going to be real high on most people's list, but I like it a lot. This is a clash of styles, and I love talking about these clash of styles. Army, a plodding team. They play really slowly. Last year, 125th out of 128 teams in tempo. Georgia State was 15th. So they're going to try to push the pace. My question mark for Army this year is their offensive line. Now, usually they have a good offensive line, but they have just 25 total starts back on the offensive line. So a lot to try to take care of there on the offensive line for Army. They have a good quarterback, good depth there at quarterback too. Running backs are solid, and obviously they don't use the wide receivers in the passing game much at all, but they're good blockers. Georgia State's strength on defense is the defensive line. And you may hear other people say, Georgia State's defensive line was really good against the run. So, I wouldn't be concerned about that. However, if you look back at Georgia State last year, they played Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern's a triple option team, not exactly the same option offense as Army, but it's very similar. And they allowed 6.3 yards per carry against Georgia Southern. To me, that's a red flag because stopping the triple option is not at all like stopping a normal running game, set up from the I formation or something like that. So to me, I think Army will have success running the football here because if Georgia Southern had success, an Army team that is better running the football than Georgia Southern is likely to have success too. Now, you could argue they've had a long time to get ready for this game, and that's certainly true. I don't think that will just make them be able to just stop Army's offense in its tracks, though. Georgia State returns all 11 starters on offense from last year. Army last year, 10th in special teams play, according to S&P. Georgia State, number 106. So that's a big difference. And I think that's something that people don't look at enough is special teams. We've seen so many of these games get decided by, a shanked punt or a missed field goal late in the game. We know college kickers can be a problem. So you definitely want to handicap that a lot. I will tell you that as I look at this game, I lean Army plus the points here. Army is a team that's really well coached. I think I know what I'm going to get from them. This is the time of the year that if you have a good coach and you feel like a team's going to show up ready to play and you're getting plus points, that's always going to be my lean. So Army catching 3 points here in a game that should be relatively low scoring. I don't know what to do with the total in this game. 51.5 is almost exactly where I make the total. I'm going to take Army in the 3 points here for the purposes of this segment. I haven't bet it yet. It is a possible play for me, so I'm going to look into this one some more. Obviously, we have some time to look at this one some more, but I will say, Georgia State to me is a team that was so inconsistent last year. You look back at that game where they played Coastal Carolina. I think they lost like 51-0 or something like that. I don't like teams that can be so good one game and so bad the next. And I feel like Army, like I said, we know what we're going to get from a team like Army. Georgia State's a bit more of a back and forth team. We don't know exactly what we'll get from them. So Army +3, I'll take them plus the points here.
I think Georgia State was at an all-night kegger party the night before that Coastal Carolina game, right? I of course looked at that, but what I will say is that after that game, they beat Louisiana Monroe by about double digits, I think 18. Then they go to App State, only lost by 4. Then they beat South Alabama by double digits. Then they beat Georgia Southern, even though they gave up a lot of rushing yards. That's a head scratcher. I think there's some turnovers from our Georgia Southern that game that blew it for them. I'm trying to remember. I remember watching that game. And then Western Kentucky, they ended up winning by double digits in the Lending Tree Bowl. So they kind of woke up after that. Here's the thing. I can never bet an option team the first week unless they're playing Old Dominion or something like that. I mean, it's a situation where even though the coach is so good for Army, and he is a damn good coach, they have all month to run options. And it's just, and the fact that they do play Georgia Southern, the kids, they return 3 D linemen. They should be able to figure that out. I kind of, it makes me look towards Georgia State a little bit more. Now, my numbers were on Pick'em though. It's a problem. I mean, so my numbers are on pick. I can't bet Georgia State here, especially with a big power rating discrepancy. I'm going to wait to see if my power ratings are wrong before I make a stupid play going way against them the first week. But just having that kind of time to prepare. Army only returns one offensive lineman starter. Now they do return 4 quarterbacks that all have experience, and they're going to be all running the option, which is fine. You want multiple guys at quarterback when you're running the option. They have a great defense, and they return a lot of defense. So I like Cornelius Brown. I'm staying away from it at the 3. But, hey, if you want to play it, God bless you. My power ratings say to play it. So there you go.
One thing I was just kind of looking up as you were talking to see how Monken has done in these first few weeks of the season, because I agree with you that the option teams can take a little while to get going. I do think Army's a really well-coached team. In week 1, they're 8-3 against the spread in their last 11. Week 1 through week 3, they're actually 17-7 in the last 24. So they've been good early in the season. So this is one that I will look into some more. Obviously, we got time, like I said, and this might end up being a play for me. I hope somebody comes in and bumps this one up to 3.5 so that I can get that hook. And I think this will be a close game. So I'm not necessarily saying I think Army will win, but I think this is one of those games that come down to the final possession. +3 is certainly my strong lean in this game.
Oh, that's a great number for Monken. Didn't even know that. I'm gonna have to relook at option teams over the past few years and see if my inclination's right, because that might just be an inclination. I want to make sure I'm correct on that. Let's move into the next game: Penn State versus Wisconsin, and my Badgers laying 4.5 points. Total on this is 51.5. Kyle, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I'll let you clean up here on this one because I know you have plenty to say about Wisconsin games. Big game to start off the Big Ten. Clearly, Penn State was better than their record last year. I don't trust James Franklin in close games. He's made so many strange decisions that I think Penn State is kind of prone to losing those close games because of James Franklin. Both teams are really good at running back. Berger is excellent for Wisconsin. They have the Clemson transfer coming in and then 2 really highly recruited running backs. Wisconsin's really good at running back this year. And obviously, Penn State, to me, Kane might be the best running back in the Big Ten, and then Lee is very good as well. You could argue Penn State has the 2 best running backs, or at least the best tailback tandem in the Big Ten. So who can stop the run in this game? That's going to be the key to me. Graham Mertz, he needs to step up for Wisconsin. I do think that Mertz will step up and play better here this year. He was so highly recruited. The only thing that worries me a bit about this, and I want Kiev's input on this one as well, Wisconsin does lack playmakers on the outside. I don't think they're exactly stacked with wide receivers that are really good. So is Mertz set up to fail in a situation like this? Because I feel like he is a good quarterback. He has good running backs, a good offensive line. I do think both teams will run it a lot, like I said. The Penn State defensive line is down quite a bit this year. I think Wisconsin will have success running the football. I would lean Wisconsin in this game, but I don't want to lay 4.5. I know this line's gone up a bit, so I wouldn't lay 4.5, 3.5, or 4. I would at least consider it. But I'm kind of curious to see what you think about Graham Mertz with the talent around him. Do you think that Wisconsin has enough playmakers for him to have that good season?
I was really disappointed when a big name transfer didn't come in at receiver. Why would you get a quarterback like that if you're just going to be that same old stubborn, run it down people's throats until you get some top 4-star recruiting teams like Michigan or Penn State or Ohio State, and they completely stuff you, or even Iowa lately, and Minnesota's been stuffing people now. It's just it drives me nuts. Like why didn't nobody transfer to Wisconsin? Now Davis was hurt last year, and Pryor was hurt, right? And that's Kendrick Pryor is what I was trying to say, not Mark Pryor. I don't know why I said Mark Pryor, maybe old Cub or something. But
he was hurt a lot.
He was hurt all the Tommy John and all that stuff. But Kendrick Pryor, I mean, they both had COVID issues. And then when that happened, Mertz went from looking like a freaking stud to looking terrible. And he looked confused at the pocket. DK was the other receiver. He was missing them. But this injury stuff for Davis and Pryor has been going way back since they're starting in the career. They're kind of thin-bodied guys. They're small. They're a little bit speedy. Davis has great hands. Ferguson's going to be really the guy. And when I saw Mertz missing Ferguson against teams like Northwestern and Indiana, I could tell he had the shakes a little bit. Mertz lost a little confidence. So the fact that I seen what he can do against Illinois and Michigan, how he just carved them up, made some big throws. He's got a tough arm. Another year going from freshman to sophomore to junior. It's a big growth when it comes to college kids. Those are some big years that you can really mature. I remain cautiously optimistic, but I'm really pissed that they didn't get a 3, 4, 5-star transfer from somebody, because they were all over the place this year. And so that disappointed me. They better have something like Abbott or something coming up. But what I do like is, of course, you still got your offensive coordinator there in Jim Leonard. He didn't leave. The Packers offered him a job. It really scratches my head why didn't he leave. You had a couple guys like Isaiah Loudermilk and a couple other ones like Wild Goose go to the pros. And but at the same time, they returned most of their defense. Leo Chanel, Jack Sanborn, Noah Burks, and then at the linebacker, they return a ton. And their offensive line, they only lost Van Lanen. He didn't prove out to be what he should have been. He actually should have went out the year before. He would have been a first-round pick, but he fell to the 3rd or 4th, 5th round because he had a bad year last year, and it was a COVID year. But at the same time, I have no problems with the running back. Jalen Berger is going to be great. We got a nice transfer from Clemson as well. If they have the tools. They have the tools, but as long as Paul Chris is calling the plays and Joe Rudolph isn't, I like their chances a heck of a lot better. These teams disappointed last year in their own way. Penn State started terrible, but they had a great finish, and Wisconsin started great and had a very poor finish until that bowl game against Wake Forest, when it was all they're actually outgained, but it was the defensive pick sixes that won it for Wisconsin right early. So Wake Forest was on their heels the whole time. But Penn State, 0.4 net yards per play, Wisconsin minus 0.1. That's a little interesting. And Penn State's supposed to be in that Ohio State side. That's supposed to be harder. Now that Michigan's taken a dive, I almost wonder if the growth of Minnesota, the growth of Iowa and Wisconsin there, of course, Ohio State's the best, but it evens it out a little bit, from west to east, and especially if Nebraska can get better. So unfortunately, my number's minus 4.5. It's literally right on the spread, and I'm not playing this one because I can see backdoors happening with this Penn State team. Clifford, I think, can run the ball very well. You can't deny that Penn State is a top recruiting team, and if you look at 2022, I'm pretty sure they're leading the way in college right now. Now, that's probably going to flip a little bit. You'll see Bama fly back up, but Penn State's recruiting hard. One thing I will say is they go through offensive coordinators, and I'm not a Franklin guy myself. I lean Wisconsin at minus 4.5, Kyle.
Yeah, I have the same lean, and if I had to bet the total, I would probably bet the under here. I think there'll be a lot of running and clock moving in this one, but I don't have any strong opinion on that either. I think this will tell us a lot about both teams, though, right? This is the game that you really want to watch. Obviously, Kiev will be watching this game, but I think everybody should want to watch a game like this. It'll tell us a lot about, if either of these teams can step up from, like you said, having a disappointing last season.
For sure. Well, let's go into a game that a little bit more about, Kyle. Ohio State versus Minnesota. And I see some 14s, plus 14, home dog Minnesota Gophers, plus 13.5. You have a pretty high total of 66. And since you're the master of Ohio State, I'll do the same thing. I'll just kind of give you my 2 cents and then see if you agree or disagree. But it's hard to bet against Ohio State no matter what, in my opinion. But it's even harder to bet against them versus Minnesota. Minnesota got ripped to pieces their first game against Michigan last year. Now, I know that's a small sample size, but they should have started a lot better last year. I don't know how you let a team like Michigan that was so down just destroy you. Maybe they had some nerves or something. I can't just remembering that game. It's hard to bet against Ohio State just for that. But, that's how the public thinks. You have to look in way deeper than that. I will say that the Gophers at least had a hard schedule last year, but they had a great finish, beating Purdue. They won at Nebraska, and they almost beat Wisconsin in that Axe game. They gave Wisconsin everything that we could handle at Camp Randall. So their finish was really good. And Tanner Morgan is back. He's going to be rowing the boat for PJ Fleck again. That's a lot of boat rowing going on in the Mississippi River there, close to St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I don't like the fact that they lost their two best players, though, on offense and defense. They lost Rashad Bateman, and they lost safety Benjamin St. Juste. So that worries me a little bit. Ohio State looks like a sexy pick, especially when it's under 2 touchdowns. But I lean Minnesota, and I'll tell you why I lean Minnesota. You have a new Ohio State team who always transfers people to the pros. Sometimes you get a class of 4 or 5 stars that just aren't quite as great as you think they were. I mean, they're put stars on them, and who knows, right? And in general, this is a big spread for a home team that's replacing their quarterback, or an away team that's replacing their quarterbacks in C.J. Stroud, no matter how good this team is. Now, I like C.J. Stroud. I like from what I saw so far with him. But if you really want to bet this, I almost think maybe the Gophers first half plus like a 7 or an 8. You probably get like a 7.5, maybe even first half. I don't think that's the worst play in the world, because I think maybe they're going to be a little bit hyped this game. So here I am bashing how they did against Michigan, but the smart play might be Gophers first half. So that's all I have to discuss on this game. Any thoughts?
So, yeah, a lot of thoughts, obviously, on this one. I will say I think Minnesota's a tough team to power rate here this season. They missed a ton of their team in games last year. This team was really hurt by COVID a lot last year. I still think PJ Fleck's a good coach. And I do think the Big Ten West is more similar to the East now, partially because there are so many good coaches in the Big Ten West, Fleck being one of them. Morgan's a really good quarterback, and they have a star running back in Ibrahim. Bateman's clearly a really big loss at wide receiver, but I do think Minnesota will have an efficient offense this year. I think they'll be very good offensively. You look at Ohio State, so no Justin Fields, obviously. I think Stroud will play well. Ohio State has tremendous depth at quarterback. If Stroud doesn't play well, you'll see other guys get chances here. Really good offensive line for Ohio State. They're going to be very good. They're elite skill position players. I think Ohio State has the best group of wide receivers in the country. Master Teague at running back is a question mark to me. I don't think he's really has that upside that you expect out of Ohio State running backs. Travion Henderson was the #1 running back recruit in the country. As a Buckeyes fan, I hope we see him quite a bit early on. I think we'll probably see him on the field a decent amount. My question about Ohio State is their defense, though. Coombs is a question mark at defensive coordinator. I hate that they let Grinch get away. He's been doing a great job at Oklahoma, certainly. I think Ohio State's defensive line is good. I think the question mark for them on defense is linebacker and secondary. Before, we've seen them have kind of the no-fly zone, great secondaries, and that's not been happening here last year, and I don't think it'll happen this year either. I think this is a justifiably high total. I couldn't take over. I mean, over 65 or 65.5 is just so high. I don't think Minnesota will try to play very fast here either. I don't think they really want, a game in the 40s in this game. Minnesota likely runs the football a lot here. And I'm certainly a huge Buckeyes fan, but I can't, let that stop me from what I think is the best value on a side. If I had to bet this game, I'd bet Minnesota here, plus the points. If you get plus 14, I think that's a pretty decent play. And I actually like Kiev's thought of taking a first half plus 7.5. I think that's probably the line you'll be able to get there, 7.5. Reason being, Ohio State does have a lot of new players. Minnesota, like I said, I think they have a higher upside than most people realize. They missed a ton of guys last year. So I think Minnesota, with a pretty good home field advantage, certainly has to be really amped for a game like this. And Ohio State, if there's going to be any kind of newcomer jitters, you would see that in the first half, you would think. So I think Ohio State wins this game, but I think 2 touchdowns is too much delay.
I always also felt like Ohio State was a second half team and Alabama was a first half team, because their guys would be resting in the second half. But last year, they even started a little rocky versus Nebraska. Now that game got way ahead of Nebraska later because of turnovers and things, and that score was a lot more misleading than what was really going on for most of the first into the second quarter. So now with all new players, it's finding the 7.5. That could be a winner right there for you, a sneaky one. And hey, you can always bet a little bit on Ohio. If you're a Buckeye fan, put a little on them in the second half. You're probably going to get a nicer number on that. So good stuff. And I do agree with you about Coombs, man. Normally you see Ohio State like a positive net 2 to 2.4 yards per play, just, looking over the last 10 years, and 1.5, 1.6, that's not cutting it quite for them, especially when they're playing teams like Rutgers, Maryland, a bad Michigan team, bad Michigan State team. So I think their defense did take a step back. We'll see if that changes, though. I think Kerry Coombs is a little bit on the hot seat here. So we'll see what happens. Great stuff. Let's move on to LSU versus UCLA, the last one I have to cover. And I have a plan in this, Kyle, so I'm gonna give it out. LSU, they were a force 2 years ago, but the team, I mean, they're a shell of themselves 2 years ago. Everyone went to the NFL. Even Jamar Chase said all last year just to go to the NFL to not play. They had some bad injury luck this year with Miles Brennan, and it's looking like number 2 quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, number 2 recruit, I believe, the freshman's going to beat out Max Johnson from the beat that I'm reading. So that's interesting because Max Johnson was under Miles Brennan, but now it's looking like Garrett Nussmeier, and I think I said his name right, is going to pass him up. And he was really good in a scrimmage game last week, over 300 yards throwing. Now, I will say that their new offensive coordinator and Jake Pease is a great hire because Jake learned from Nick Saban 4 or 5 years ago, and then he was under Joe Brady as a co-coordinator a couple years ago for LSU, and then I believe he was with Carolina a little bit last year. So two really great minds he's been under, and I think that's going to work out for them. But at the same time, LSU minus 1.74 net yards per play last year. That was horrible. And these are, once again, they lost their pros, they lost their stars, their 4 or 5 star guys, and they're replacing them with new ones. Kind of a new team again for Ed Orgeron this year. Now, UCLA, nice surprise last year, and actually a big money maker for who started backing them like halfway through the season. They were 3-4, but all 4 losses, Kyle, within 6 points, all 4 of them, kind of showing that they didn't have a lot of luck. Now, I like the fact that they return Thompson Robinson. I like the fact that I have both these teams power rated really equal, and I'm getting 4 points as a home dog. And I think the whole SEC thing is the reason for that. So UCLA gets Hawaii the first week in week 1A. So they're coming into this game with some experience, why LSU is coming into it raw. I like the first half, and I like the full game. So I'll probably be players on both, +4. What are your thoughts?
So I think if you handicap this game, you kind of have to handicap the Hawaii game a little bit too, right? Because the line will move based on what happens with that one. So if you think UCLA is going to play well in that one, you want to bet UCLA now. If you think they're going to disappoint, you might get a better number later. I don't like UCLA as much as you do as a team overall. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is overrated. He's turned the ball over so much. His average depth of target was 7.5 yards last year. So a lot of short passes, and yet still a turnover-worthy play on 5.6% of plays according to PFF. So really bad decisions from DTR. I do think that they have a good offensive line, and UCLA is improving. UCLA ranked 7th in the nation in blitz percentage last year on defense, but they didn't get to the quarterback quite enough. So opponents 274 passing yards per game. LSU was really hit hard by COVID last year, and I think this Tigers team does have high upside. So I'm leaning against what you said there in this one. I'm leaning LSU. I don't think I will bet this one unless the line comes down based on UCLA playing well in that first game. If we get a shorter number, a 2 or 2.5 or something like that, I might take LSU here. UCLA under 7 season wins is a small bet of mine as well. So I don't like UCLA too much. I will agree that there is some upside there, and Kelly is a good coach. You know, this is a key year for him, obviously, right? You know, because he needs to have a good season this year. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him, certainly. I think LSU has more potential to bounce back and have a really good season than what some people might think based on their recruiting and how much they were hit by COVID last year. I will say your yards per play margin thing does scare you a bit if you want to lay points with LSU, certainly. I don't trust UCLA enough to bet them in this game, so I'm probably going to pass, but I'll lean to LSU here.
And what I will say is great points on Thompson Robinson's short passes, but that's Chip Kelly's game. The depth's never going to be there. It's just all speed, speed, speed. They're number 2 in returning production on Bill Connolly's. They're returning everybody, and they're a 0.7 net yards per play. So Of course, COVID did screw things up for a lot of teams, and I will say that LSU had a lot harder schedule, but this is just a massive discrepancy here. So it's nice to have some disagreement, though, because we need that to keep everyone honest, don't we?
Yeah, we agree a lot more than we disagree. So it's nice to at least have some disagreement.
Yeah, for sure. Now that's gonna be fun. We'll reassess after Hawaii and see if it's a beer bet at least. So
yeah,
we'll check into it. So any other games that we want to throw out there?
Yeah, I want to give a free play just because I didn't have a lot of strong opinions on some of these games. As we went through them, I think I like Army plus the points a good amount here. But I'll give you my free play that I definitely do like. I like Kansas State against Stanford in that first game. So I'm checking the line as we speak to make sure it's still the same. Kansas State minus 2.5 in that game. Yeah, I'll take Kansas State minus 2.5. My reason for this here is this Kansas State team was much better under Thompson at quarterback than Howard. There's a big drop off here. Chris Kleiman's a good coach, 15-7 ATS at Kansas State so far. Stanford's a team that I'm not very high on this year. I don't think their upside is very high. I think Kansas State played worse at the end of last year due to COVID issues. And instead of having Thompson, they had Howard at quarterback. Now they have Thompson back. I think Kleiman's team will be ready to start the season. So I like Kansas State minus 2.5.
Look at that. Kansas State minus 2.5. Neutral game, right?
Yep.
All right. No, that's can't disagree with that. I'm not super high on Stanford either, and they lost their quarterback. That Stanford has just not been the Stanford we remember. They've really went down. They're weird because they can really upset someone at the end. They did beat Cal somehow. I'll have to look into that one a little bit more. I think I'm siding with you on that one.
Yeah, I remember when Stanford was so good, they had that great defensive line, and I believe they had like 9 sacks last year in 6 games. I mean, they used to have a tremendous defensive line. Stanford's defense is far worse than it used to be, a big step down. Kansas State has a good running back too. His name, I think is it Vaughn, the 5'5" guy that's a jitterbug back there. Skylar Thompson, a really good quarterback. They're going to be able to get plenty of yards on this Stanford defense. I think Kansas State can score quite a few points here. They won't play necessarily very fast, but they'll be efficient. I like Kansas State in this one.
All right. Well, there you go. Kansas State for your free play, Kyle. Where could our listeners and viewers find your great information?
So you can go to huntersportspicks.com. I have early bird specials up for football packages through this weekend. All college football for $450. All football, that's NFL and college football, will be $750 this year. The early bird price is $699. And also check out that Totally Totals package there at the Odds Breakers, which we're premiering here this week. So we'll have that to look forward to as well. And I'll have some free plays up there at theoddsbreakers.com. Follow me at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter. Also, if you haven't signed up for my free picks newsletter at huntersportspicks.com, do that. The free plays have done great the last few years, and I will be sending those out starting next weekend. So look forward to that, and super pumped to be on here to talk college football.
All right. Awesome stuff, Kyle. Thank you so much. And everyone, to check us out, the Odds Breakers, to get some of Kyle's stuff as well. Thanks so much for coming on, Kyle. Have a great week. We'll be texting.
Thanks.